Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be talking about the concept of split pushing in League of Legends. So special thanks to Steve for the very generous donation. I really appreciate it. And we're going to be covering what is split pushing, sort of the dangers of split pushing, why sometimes it's not a great idea to do it, what are the conditions for a good split push, when is it a good time to do it, and then some of the strong split pushers, and we'll go over why as we go along. If you want to access the Google Doc, you can find that in the description. You can also find timestamps if you want to jump around to different parts. If you don't have time to watch the whole thing. Okay, so first of all, and I'm going to be using RiftKit a lot to kind of show you on the map what different things are, just in terms of thinking about spatially on the map, what you should be doing. So what is split pushing? Okay, so a split push occurs when a champion rotates away from the rest of the team to create pressure in a side lane. So usually the rest of the team will be in the middle of the lane, in the middle of the map, which is where a lot of people gravitate towards, which makes sense because that is the closest proximity to pretty much everything on the map, right? If you're in the middle, then it's the least distance to rotate to wherever you need to go, right? Whereas if you're way over here and then there's action going down in the bottom lane, you're never going to get there in time. Whereas if you're mid lane and something's going on, you know, anywhere on the map, there's a chance you might be able to get there in time. So a lot of people towards kind of the middle and later portions of the game will gravitate towards the middle of the map. So a split pusher deliberately moves towards a side lane to avoid this in the middle of the map. So, for instance, if this tower is down, then a split pusher, you know, might come up here and deliberately try to go to a side lane here to create pressure while everybody else is in the middle of the map here. The reason that you do this, and a good use of the split push, is it forces enemies to split up and deal with the split pusher. So usually it's a top laner. Sometimes you can get a mid laner to split push if they have teleport. Rarely it'll be a jungler. The problem with a jungler is if you try to split to the bottom side of the map, which is what a lot of people do when Baron's up, and if they see the jungler on the bottom side of the map, they can just go do Baron because they know there's not going to be a smite there. So if your Udyr tries to go down and split push bottom lane, that's probably going to be a bad idea because the enemy is going to have open access to the Baron if that happens. Okay, so usually it's a mid laner or a top laner. And most of the time it's a top laner that split pushes. Okay, so it's a good option if your team can't really team fight, which is nice. So if they have a better 5v5 team, you know, like they have a Zac, Jarvan, Annie, and Brand or something, it's going to be really hard to win that team fight. Or if they have, like, you know, a classic, like, Malphite Yasuo, or, you know, just some other combo that's going to be really gross if you're grouped up as 5 people. Sometimes it's better to have a split push. Or conversely, if you have, and this happens a lot more often, you have a bunch of people on your team that are assassins or are pretty good at 1v1 or sneaking up on people, but they're really bad in team fights. Like, Shaco's a great example of this. Shaco's not that great in team fights, but he's great if he can pick someone off alone in the jungle. The same is true of champions like Fizz, you know, Zed, LeBlanc. There are a lot of champions like this that would much prefer just to assassinate one person. And so what happens is, if you can pull everyone on the enemy team kind of towards the middle of the map here, grab all this stuff. This would be useful for examples. So this is kind of what a split push would look like. You would have, well, you'd have that random person over here trying to farm wolves at 45 minutes. That probably is pretty accurate. But let's just assume they're all actually here. And you have a split pusher top. And your split pusher is better than their split pusher at this point in the game. Let's say that you have like a Camille and it's like 30 minutes of the game versus their Scion or whatever. If you have a better split pusher, then they're going to have to send someone up here. So the key thing that you want to happen a lot of times is this person's going to win 1v1. Eventually they're going to have to send somebody. So they send somebody, you know, up here to help with this. This guy has to not die and just kind of back up. And in exchange, now you have a 4v3. So you could, in theory, try to fight him. If it's going to be hard to dive him, if they have like an Anivia or something and it's just impossible to like get to him, then you could come over and threaten Baron. So then if your team, you know, rotates over here and you have really good vision control of the jungle, you know, y'all could stack up in this bush or something, and then once they try to come over here to go check this because they have no vision, then you could engage on them and fight them here. Or, you know, another kind of version of this is, let's say that you have 3 people in the middle, one person's middle, so now you have a 3-on-3, and this support tries to, you know, rotate up here to help this person, then the jungler could catch him out. You know, the Shaco could catch him right here. So what split pushing forces people to do is split up, and you push in a side lane to create pressure, and that not only allows for a 1v1 sometimes at the top lane, or allows for engagements in the mid lane, but it also like makes people rotate a lot more, so they don't just stand in one place. So the support's going to have to constantly run up and down to help defend this, right? Or somebody else on the enemy team is going to constantly have to rotate around. So if you get good vision in the jungle and lock out their vision, then that is a really good opportunity for you to assassinate people. So it forces the enemy team to just wander around the map more and not just ball up in 5-person ARAM middle. So that's the goal, especially if you have certain champions. Another advantage of this is like it's more difficult to set up macro-wise, but it's easier to win micro-wise. So if you do this macro, so if you set this up, this jungler doesn't really have to outplay anything fancy in the jungle, right? They get the jump on this person, they get to assassinate and kill him for free. Whereas if you have a 5-on-5 team fight, you know, you're risking your, you know, one of your allies missing a key skill shot. You're risking your AD carry forgetting to use heal, or like not using flash, or just mispositioning and getting caught out by the enemy. So when you're engaging in a 5v5 team fight, if stuff is relatively even, there's a lot of things that could go wrong. You know, a lot of people on your team could mess up a ton of stuff. And if they mess it up, the enemy team's going to snowball it really hard and probably win the entire fight, right? Whereas in the split push scenario, you get the advantage. You get the first move on them. You get the jump on them to kill them. And there's it's a lot less micro-intensive. The person just kills the other person one-on-one. So there's a lot less stuff potentially that could go wrong in a split push from a micro perspective. And that's why you'll see a lot of boosters and people like that playing split push type of champions, because they know that they can outplay somebody 1v1. They're going to play a champion that can do that, and they're going to trust their skill to be able to kind of 1v1 that person or to maneuver around the map. And it takes a lot of pressure off your allies, and it makes sure that they never have a proper 5v5 team fight to get it back into the game. It forces uneven fights. So if they come up here and you're a really smart split push and you back up, then your team can actually fight a 4v3. And then that way, even if they mess up some stuff because they have an extra person, it's likely that they're going to win the fight. Or they can pick them off in the jungle, as I just mentioned before. So it takes away a lot of potential possibilities for your allies to goof stuff up and throw fights, because they're always going to have an advantage, right? They're always going to have a numbers advantage if you're doing split pushing correctly. And, you know, you can even catch people out. So let's say that they send people up here. You get this guy pushed into the tower. You see the supports like coming up over here, and you just kind of duck out and just sort of rotate around here. Then now as the split pusher, you know, you can hide here. And then once the top lane pushes this out and the support is coming back down this way, then you can catch them out. So it doesn't even have to be someone else. You can just push in and then catch them out. What's up, dear? Hold on a second. I think she wants to... Sorry about that. My wife wanted me to grab the baby here. Happy baby. Happy. Okay, come grab her. I'm in the middle of a guide. We got a little comic relief here. Yeah.
Yes,
oh, she's
having her Christmas jammies.
A little early for Christmas. Yeah,
Or
is that right?
late.
Or late, whatever.
She was cold after her bath, so she needed to wear some fleece jacket.
Anyways, so that's what a split push is. That's what's going on, and that's the advantage of a split push, is that you take away potential risks of your allies goofing stuff up in full-on 5-on-5 team fights. So that's all good from the micro level. However, from the macro level, this can create a lot of problems as well if this is not done properly. And so split pushing can be good, and oftentimes you'll need to try to do something like that in a game, but it can also be very risky. So If you're split pushing, the number one problem with split pushing, and I know that you guys are probably going to guess what this is that the split pusher gets caught and killed, right? And this happens all the time. So let's say that, you know, split pusher's up here trying to push into the tier 2. You have no vision of anything in this jungle. And your allies are pushed back. The jungler's over here just doing something random. And your allies are getting pushed back to the tier 1, right? And their jungler is just missing. You have no idea where they are. So their jungler could be up here. So this is a very common scenario with split pushing. Thank you for the sub. I appreciate it. A very common scenario where your allies don't have pressure anywhere else on the map. You have a split pusher trying to push up. Jungler comes up here. That way. There we go. Jungler comes up here, wraps around, ganks this person. This person dies, and then just rages at his team. Why aren't you guys doing anything on the map? What are you doing? There are 2 people top. It's like, yeah, there are 2 people top, but we can't do anything right now because their team has us pushed into tower. Okay, and so that's the issue a lot of times with split pushing, especially at kind of lower elos, is people won't understand what map pressure is. Like they'll just think, okay, if I can just mindlessly split push, and then they send 2 people up here, even if I die, my team will be able to do something because they're gonna have a 3v4. Maybe, but junglers, you know, and a lot of people at this elo just will not understand that also. So you have to watch. You have to think, okay, where's my jungler? Are they actually going to be able to fight down here or not? And most importantly, don't die. Like, that's the most important thing. You don't have to die up here just because there's 2 people. Like, you can push up to here, then you can realize, like, hey, I don't have any vision. I should go ahead and leave. Because you can see there's no more pressure on the map. And then you leave, and when they try to come up and get you, it's no problem because you're already gone. Right? So you have to be aware of that as a split pusher. Is like, if you don't see them on the map, they're probably coming towards you. Right? If you're pushed up, if they push in really far, and even if you're really strong like your Nasus and you could 2v1, I mean, they could, in theory, even send a 3rd person up here to get you. Unless you have map pressure. Now, on the flip side, this is when it's good. You know, if you have them pushed up to, like, their tier 2... then that could potentially be a good thing. Right? Because now if they send that 1 person up here, that's the scenario where people could possibly engage. So that's just very common, is you have to not die. And that's the number one thing that happens with split pushers, is they split push, they die, they blame the team because they don't understand why their team can't do anything on the map when there are 2 people top. And the truth of the matter is, sometimes you just can't. You know, sometimes you have no wave clear. Like, they might have an Anivia on their team who instantly wave clears everything, pushes into the tower, and you have like a Diana that's 0-3 on your team, and you have no wave clear, and so you can't stop them from pushing you into your tower. You know, if you have like a Diana, an Ezreal, and, you know, like a Janna or something, Anivia can push like all 3 of those in by herself, pretty much. And then it frees up the other people to roam around the map and do whatever they want. So another scenario is your allies could get engaged on and killed. Okay, so this is another, like, potential risk. So if you're up here split pushing, and you're telling your allies, just hold on, don't fight, and then, you know, they're over here, and then you've got this, you know, Janna that's trying to walk up and W somebody to poke because she maxed W, and then she gets engaged on and killed, then that's really bad. Right? So if you're the strongest person on your team, you have all of the gold, right? Because you're getting a lot of the resources because you're in the solo lane by yourself pushing. If they get engaged on and killed, especially if the enemy top laner teleports down here on a ward and comes to flank from behind, like, that's a risk also. Is maybe they're sitting here, maybe the Janna doesn't even go up, but now they have a Malphite here and a Yasuo, and your team's not paying attention, you know, they're not sweeping or clearing wards with pink wards or sweepers. This Malphite teleports behind him, comes in, boom, and then, you know, the Yasuo goes in, and then everybody just dogpiles and kills him. that's going to be really bad too. So, you know, that is a major risk of a split push, is that your team can get engaged on and killed. And so you're kind of leaving it in their hands if you're up here split pushing to do that. So that's another major risk, is that people will get engaged on and killed. This is why it's very important that you have teleport. So that way, you know, if you see this, you know, Malphite coming down here, and then you teleport onto a ward right here, and then you come up and flank, then you might be able to turn that around depending on what's going on. So that's really important why you have teleport also, and you're watching for wards and seeing, you know, you have a good idea where you're going to go if a fight breaks out, so you can teleport down. I mean, the dream scenario is if you're top, you have some kind of hard CC, like if you're a, I don't know, a Singed or something, and that Malphite's trying to teleport right here, you walk up and flip him, and then you fade over into the distance, and then you teleport down there. That's a huge win. So, you know, that's just kind of how that works. Is it's macro very risky. You have to count on your team not getting engaged on, not getting killed, especially if you do a 1-3-1 split push. So far, let's talk about a couple of different kinds of split pushes. So there's a 4-1, which means that you have, you know, one person up here on their one person, and then you have 4 people in the middle just kind of A-ramming. So that's useful, but sometimes that can be a stalemate too. If it's about even top lane, you know, you can't really push into them too much. You know, they're just hiding out at the tower. Maybe they have an Anivia mid lane. You can't push or wave clear anything. So there's just not a lot of action. Another thing that you can do is a 1-3-1 split push, and what that means is you have people in both lanes split pushing. Okay, so you have 3 people in the middle. That's why they call it 1-3-1. You have 1 top, 3 in the middle, 1 in the bottom. Okay, so sometimes this is a fairly common setup too. Now this forces a lot of splitting up. So this is what you want to do if you have like double assassin or something like that. If you really, really want people to have to split up around the map, you do a 1-3-1. Okay, so what this will definitely force some action. So then this way, if you have either your mid lane or your top lane are really strong, then this will force action. If both of them are really strong, if both of them force 2 people to go to them to deal, then it's going to be almost impossible for your team to lose that if it's executed correctly, if they don't get caught and killed. So this would be a way that you could potentially work around in Anivia, or something like that. Is if Anivia is just hanging out middle, and you've got this Zed bot lane who's 5-0, then you could potentially, you know, rotate around her. So you could keep people here. You could eventually have one of your people rotate up here, another one rotate down here. Like, it's just going to be musical chairs of lots of rotations. And that is really good if you have champions like Zed, like Fizz, like Shaco, all of these champions that want to catch people out in the jungle. If you can provide good vision coverage for that, a 1-3-1 just creates chaos on the map. It doesn't let the team fight. So then they're not going to get to use their Malphite Yasuo combo, because Malphite and Yasuo are never going to be together. They're always going to be split up. You know, Anivia's wave clear is not going to matter as much because you can just rotate away from her. She can only be in one lane at once. And if you have 3 lanes of pressure, then you might be able to work around her. So that's the 1-3-1. But once again, this allows even more problems for execution, especially with a 1-3-1. So let's say that your mid laners down here splitting. You have your AD carry over here. You have your top lane over there. They have their support AD carry in middle here, and you don't know where the jungler is. Okay? So jungler's just kind of in a random place that you don't have warded. If your Zed is pushed into right here, and the next tower is up here, and they start splitting, people will ping. They'll say, hey, Zed's bottom. That Zed might have Ignite. They're not going to have a teleport, and so they can say, all right, let's do this. And then they just walk up. You know, they have their support Alistar or something engage here. Jungler runs out, and then they engage on you, and they force a 4v3. So that's really common in a 1-3-1 scenario where you don't have appropriate map pressure. Like top lane might be pushed in, but mid probably won't, especially if they have Ignite. And so you have to wait. So the correct move here, if you are the blue team and you want to 1-3-1, because you're never going to get through their wave clear if they have Anivia, Ziggs, Xerath, something like that. You know, the correct play here is to back up, Make sure that you have really good vision on your flanks so you don't get flanked. Back up. Do your best to wave clear, and as they advance forward, you just keep backing up a little bit, and you just wait until they get enough pressure, until the Zed gets all the way over to here. And then once they have to send someone over here, once they have to send the jungler over here, you know, and they might have to send someone else, then if you have this warded, you know, if you have your flanks warded, then you'll see, okay, 2 are going bottom, now we can go. And then you can go in. So it's this little game of cat and mouse where you have to back up and wait until you get appropriate pressure in both lanes, and then you have to wait until those people rotate and get out of there, and then you can push up. Okay? That's one of the most common mistakes, is people, like, won't recognize, you know, they'll say, Zed, like, let's just group up. Why can't we just group up as 5? I don't understand. This is so stupid. Like, just group up. You know, because this, you know, the support will get caught out. They won't realize that Zed doesn't have pressure down there yet. Support will get caught and killed, and they'll just say, let's just group. That's what everyone says. Let's just group, let's just group. It's like, well, sometimes that's okay, but sometimes that doesn't work. If they have Anivia, they have Xerath, they have Ziggs, they have just all this stuff with really good wave clear, sometimes you can't group and siege that because you're not going to be able to end the game. There's a game where I was against Anivia, I think it was last week. We were really far ahead, but everyone's like, let's just group up, let's just group up. And it was literally just 10 minutes of us just like basically watching Anivia wave clear in front of the tower, and we couldn't get any damage on it. That's why Anivia's so strong. I keep using Anivia on purpose because I think she's the strongest mid laner in solo queue right now for most people. I mean, once you get up in a challenger, maybe Cassiopeia, maybe Ryze still, but Anivia is really, really good for that reason, because you can't, because of the split push. It forces the enemy team, if the enemy team does not have a good split pusher, if all they have is a team fight comp, if they have a Scion top, which I think we had in that game, you know, if the enemy team just has a Scion top and their mid laner is, you know, something that can't split that well, you're just not going to win because you're never going to push through her. And even on defense, she can stop you. So, you know, if you have, let's say your jungler is like Udyr or something, and is splitting top lane, your top lane splitting bot, so now the jungler's being a good jungler and staying on the Baron side while they split push. And then you have this Anivia middle. Even if they have 4 people, Anivia can still wave clear this. They're not going to push into her tower. So she can do it defensively, she can do it offensively. You know, if they try to send a couple people over here, there's 2 people trying to defend this tower, you know, Anivia can just channel her stuff here, and you're just not going to be able to defend that. So that's kind of the complexity of split pushing, is that 4-1 is kind of common, and that's pretty straightforward. You just don't want to get the person caught. 1-3-1 is something that you have to do if your team can't team fight. If you have like Shaco, Zed, Talon, you know, just a lot of assassins on your team, this is what you have to do. And it is difficult to execute because now you have 2 people that could potentially get caught and killed. It's really hard as a support to figure out where to ward. And then you have to count on the 3 people in the middle also not getting engaged on and killed 4v3. So it's really difficult macro-wise, but once again, micro-wise, there's less of a chance of your team screwing up a team fight. So it has its pros, it has its cons in terms of split pushing. Okay. The split pusher has to be able to win a 1v1 too. And there are certain champions that are good for it that we'll talk about here in just a second. But, you know, if you're playing a champion that can't 1v1 anyone on the enemy team, you know, if the enemy team has a 7-0 Zed, and, you know, you're trying to split push as an AD carry, which happens all the time. You'll see a Vayne try to split push or something. So, you know, you'll get this Vayne that's like down here trying to just split push and farm this side wave, and then Zed just rolls up and kills her every single time, like 3 times in a row. They're like, geez, this Zed keeps killing me. Why don't you guys do something elsewhere on the map? It's like, dude, you can't split push. People just get in this mode and they just think, okay, I'm Vayne, I have to get some farm. No, you don't. Back up and get with your team. Yeah, it sucks because you're behind and you're Vayne and you can't siege and you don't have wave clear and you're kind of worthless, you know, if you can't 1v1. But that's just the nature of how assassins or champions like Vayne work, is if they fall really far behind, they don't have anything to fall back on, right? They don't have crowd control. They don't have wave clear. Usually for team fights, crowd control is very, very good. Sometimes in split push situations, it's not going to matter as much. But in team fights, it's all about that crowd control and sieging and wave clear. But But yeah, a champion like Vayne can't do that. Whereas someone like Twitch, on the other hand, he can split push pretty well because he can get away, he can turn invisible, and he can sneak up on people and kill them. And he can team fight really well. So he can just pop his ult and just destroy everyone on a team. And that's why Twitch is almost always one of the best solo queue champions, because he can double as an assassin, as a split pusher, as a team fighter. He can do whatever you need him to do. So that's one of the strengths of someone like Twitch over Vayne. Tristana is someone else. Tristana can't split as well as like Twitch can, but she's still pretty good at one-on-one because of her rocket jump resets and her really high burst damage at level 6, and she's really good at team fights because of her range, and she's really good at sieging because she blows up towers really quickly. So that's why that's part of why those champions are so strong, is because they have multiple modes. They're good at different things. They can change according to how you want to set up your team, whether you want a 4-1 split push, 1-3-1, whether you just want to try to group up as 5 and team fight. Those champions have a lot more versatility to them. But anyways, if your champion can't win a 1v1, even if it's a good 1v1 champ, if you're like 0-5 Fiora, you know, against 7-0 Zed, you're in big trouble. You're probably going to lose. So at that point, you're going to have to try to catch someone else out. You're going to have to try to push up as much as you can and have good vision. And then when Zed shows up, you're just going to have to leave and try to find somewhere else to fight. But that's those are kind of the dangers for split pushing, and I've kind of segued into the things that you need to do for a good split push. So in order to execute a good split push, you need to be able to 1v1 anyone on the enemy team, or at least anyone who has a teleport. If if that Zed comes down there and he has Ignite, you might be able to work around that, because you can push up, force Zed to go down there, and then you can teleport over to a fight, potentially. So ideally, anyone on the enemy team, you can 1v1, or you can at least outmaneuver them, either through mobility or through teleport, to get to fights and to force action elsewhere on the map while they're occupied. Usually you have to have teleport. So, if you like to take Ignite top lane as Fiora, you're really causing a lot of problems for your team, because you're not going to be able to split push later because you're not going to have teleport. So it's almost always necessary to have a teleport top lane in this meta right now. Now, they're about to buff Ignite in 8.5. There might be some different options there, but by and large, you need a teleport on your team in the top lane, if not also in the mid lane. Teleport globals are just so strong. They're just so strong. So it allows you to pressure side lanes while still having presence, still having a threat of going back to the major fight. You have to have enough vision to have a successful split push. So like I mentioned before, there's a lot of rotations, a lot of musical chairs going on, especially if you do a 1-3-1, and you need to see where they're going. You need to see if someone's rotating the top lane, because you can't go up here and split this top lane if you don't know where the jungler is, for example, especially if your allies are backed into the mid lane here. If your allies are backed in and jungler's missing, if you have vision here, once again, you can push up, force the jungler to come up here, and then back up. Maybe that will give, your jungler, or that's the jungler here. Let's get my letters mixed up here. Oh, there we go. There we go. Maybe that'll give your jungler some time to just, farm the raptors, or, farm wolves, or just something if they send 2 people up there, right? If they send 2 people up there and you have everyone together here, you might be able to engage on them. Right? But at a bare minimum, it's going to give your team time to just handle some stuff and scale a little bit. You're removing pressure by forcing 2 people up there. So you just want to make sure that you have enough vision to see them coming and to back up. Okay, if you're going to split push, you need to make sure your team can apply pressure elsewhere on the map. I just described that. This is a very common scenario where you're pushed in, or maybe your AD carries down here, just mindlessly farming here, trying to freeze this lane because they heard some pro players say that freezing's good. So this is why you don't freeze bot lane, by the way. This is a huge reason. I don't see a lot of people do it because I tell them not to in games usually. But if your AD carry, like if the wave is pushed in, like let's say the wave's right here, and your AD carry is just trying to AFK farm this, they basically they have a 4v5. Like, yeah, your AD carry is getting some farm, but it's also a massive risk, because now they can send 2 people top with no consequences, right? They can send 2 people top, doesn't work out, oh well, they're still going to apply pressure here, or if they're just holding this top lane, they get the jungler here, and then they get to, you know, have 4 people threaten this mid lane tower, which is very common, and they're probably going to get the tower, depending on what the team comp is, while this person, you know, farms. It's not worth it for you to go up, you know, 5 or 10 farm if you're going to be losing towers for it. Because then once this tower goes down, then they can, you know, rotate up here, kill them, then grab Rift. This is why you should never freeze. Okay? It's very, very rare that you should freeze for an extended length of time at least. Sometimes in bot lane, maybe. Maybe in some circumstances. But it's very rare. You want to take the tower and you want to get an advantage as much as possible. So, like, the idea of most of League of Legends, and I talked about this in my most recent... I've talked about this in my macro video, and I can't remember the last video, my laning essentials video that I just came out with a little bit ago. The goal is to push people up to tower and rotate most of the time. And you can do this as a top laner too. Just because you're a split pusher doesn't mean you can't do anything. So, other than split push. So, for example, if you push them in right here, and their top laner is pinned into this tower, you can rotate over and make a play here on everyone else that's hanging out mid lane, right? So if they're all hanging out here, you push into this tower, you can either teleport over here or you can just walk here. If you're a really fast champion like Camille, you know, you can run up and wall jump over here and then just come in and engage on somebody. Right? So you want to preoccupy them with something, right? Put some minions in their tower so that way if he wants to teleport over here to do something, he's going to miss like 10 minions over here, right? Then in theory, if he uses his teleport and you didn't, and you guys win this fight, or at least go even, then you can teleport back over here and come up and fight. So maybe you force him to use a teleport when you didn't have to because the minions are in his tower, and you got to walk, and he had to teleport because he was really late. Okay? So you want to try to apply pressure yourself, and if you're going to go deep into their territory, if you're going past the tier 1, you need to make sure that you have pressure elsewhere on the map, or it's not going to work. It's not on your team to create the pressure. Right? They should create the pressure, but it's on you to notice whether or not they have pressure. So if you get caught and killed, that's your fault because you need to see, okay, my team's behind. We don't have enough pressure. I need to back up right now. Like I can push a little bit, but then I got to back up. You know, if you just mindlessly split and you get caught, it's your fault. Like you have to always look at and interpret the minimap. So that's the thing is split pushing doesn't involve a lot of micro most of the time, right? You're just killing minion waves. So it's a lot easier than trying to manage a team fight. But at the same time, it's a lot more macro intensive, so you have to really look at your minimap a lot and interpret it and understand when there's a threat coming your way. Understand when your team doesn't have pressure. So it's not their fault that you got caught and killed. You know, should they be applying more pressure? Maybe. It depends. But ultimately, you're the person who has the last call. You get to decide, am I going to stay up this far or not? And so it's ultimately your final judgment if you get caught or not. They're not forcing you to play up that far. Okay. You need to make sure your team has strong wave clear and disengage. That's another thing. So that's something that I mentioned here is like, if the enemy team has really good wave clear, it's going to be really hard to apply extra pressure. Right? So that's why champions like Anivia are so strong in the mid lane. And Rise, they nerfed his wave clear a little bit, but it's still probably okay. But champions with really good wave clear just create a ton of extra pressure because you can't get through that. You know, if they have an Anivia here, your team's just not going to be able to push through that most of the time. So, you know, you have to interpret that and say, wow, you know, we're not going to be able to do anything about that, so we might have to switch into a 1-3-1. Or, wow, I'm going to have to be really careful as a split pusher because my team's never going to push through that Xerath mid, for example. So that's something just to be aware of. On the flip side, maybe your team can apply a lot of pressure. You can think, okay, my team's probably going to be able to get a lot of pressure because we have a really fed, I don't know, Anivia or just something else that has really good wave clear in the mid lane. We have a really fed, like, Cassiopeia or something like that, or Twisted Fate, so we can afford to split push really quickly. Another option is you have to watch out for globals. And that kind of fits into the mobility thing here. If the enemy team has a lot of globals, you need to be very careful whenever you're splitting up, right? So if they have a Twisted Fate, or they have a Galio, or they have a Shin, or even if their teleport is up, you have to be very careful because they could just, you know, be anywhere on the map at any time. And so they could get behind you if you're a split pusher, maybe this TF, you know, they push you in right here, and then TF roams up here. Talia's another one. This is why TF and Talia Twisted Fate and Talia are two of the best champions for solo queue almost always, and I think I had them on my my one-trick list as the best, most reliable solo queue champions, is because they have those globals. So, you know, team pushes up here. You know, you've got a split pusher up top. Where'd everything go? Okay, here's this. Top laner. Yeah, you're trying to do your top laner, mid pushes up, TF warps up here, boom, dead. And people don't play around that very often either. This could be Talia, it could be Twisted Fate. It could happen with Shin sometimes, you know, if you think that Shin's not there and you're just facing, you know, their mid laner's covering right here and then Shin just teleports onto this. It could be Twitch, something that's invisible, Twitch, Eve, Kha'Zix with mobility boots, like running through the whole jungle invisible. So you just have to watch out for that, and you have to make sure you have a lot of mobility. So a lot of split pushers have ways to escape. So sometimes champions that are good at one-on-one can have some problems with split pushing, right? So even though Sion's great in lane one-on-one, he can have a problem split pushing because he doesn't have escapes outside of his ultimate. Or someone like a Darius, for example, can have a hard time split pushing because he doesn't have mobility. He can get ganked and killed a lot. Whereas someone like Garen is going to be stronger in lower elos at split pushing because he can just run away. Right? So that kind of determines split push, at least in part, is how mobile is the champion. Okay. So who are some good split pushers? We'll go ahead and round out the video here and see if we can close out in under 45 minutes. Okay. The two best split pushers top lane almost always are going to be Camille and Fiora. These are the two that I had on. I think I had both of them as my best one-trick champions. Camille is probably going to get a nerf at some point. She's seeing a lot of pro play. She's just she has a really, really good kit as a champion right now. If you want to learn someone to one-trick top lane, Camille is almost always going to be one of the better choices. She has been nerfed a lot. She got nerfed a lot last year, but she's still really good. So what makes Camille a really good split pusher? Well, number one is her hook shot. This gives her an extreme amount of mobility. It's very, very good. It's on a pretty low cooldown once you max it out, and this is what you max, typically, on Camille is your hook shot. You can use it to create a stun, and also to gain a lot of attack speed when you're fighting somebody. But you also have mobility, and you can jump walls with it. So if you look here, you know, if you're Camille pushed up here, you know, and then let's say that Twisted Fate tries to come up here and gank you. Let's say he just like warps right here behind you. You know, you can just say, okay, whatever, like wall hop over here, flash over this. Or you could just say, like, if you're pushed up right here, Twisted Fate tries to port on you right here, you could just walk down here, hook shot onto this, and then pop over the wall, boom, you're out. So it's just really, really hard to pin her down. As a champion, so that allows her to get away really quickly. It also allows her to rotate really quickly. So let's say that they are pulling their jungler up here and you have good vision and you're a Camille and the rest of the team is just down here, you know, A-ramming and they're sending their jungler up there. Well, now you see that jungler coming. Okay, just hook shot over this wall, rotate down, boom, hook shot in here, start a fight. So that's really strong in that she can not only get away from ganks, but she can rotate around the map really quickly. She's just really fast at getting back to lane. Like, maybe you don't have to use your teleport. So maybe on one of your early backs, you just hook shot all the way up, run up, hook shot, hook shot, hook shot. Just get up the lane really quickly. Maybe you can hold on to your teleport when the enemy Darius has to use teleport to get back to lane. Then you have your TP free to go do something else. So the fact that she has such extreme mobility is really good. She's also does a lot of damage, and does a lot of damage to tanks because she has true damage. This you'll see with Fiora as well. She has true damage on her Q if you wait enough on the second passive, and she gets some free shielding based on her adaptive defenses. So it's not like insane shielding, but it's pretty good. It's 20% extra health basically for an all-in. Excuse me, which is really nice. So she has a lot of base damage, which includes true damage. She has a shield. She has a lot of mobility that doubles as a stun. She has this ability which does maximum % health and also heals you and also triggers Comet with a slow. So that allows her to have a really nice build of going, Comet, Mana Flow, Band, Celerity, Scorch, gives her a really good laning phase. And then she's also going to have Second Wind and Bone Plating. So it's going to be very difficult to trade with her in lane if she knows what she's doing. Then you have Hextech Ultimatum, which is great against most champions. It's a 2.5 second, really hard CC. If they don't have a knockback in their kit, Tristana can get around this some, Janna can get around this, but a lot of champions, unless they can knock her out of that zone, you're stuck there, for 2.5 seconds. So that means she's really great for ganks, right? So if your ally jungler comes with her a gank and you're level 6, it's basically a guaranteed kill in most matchups because you can hookshot onto them. It's going to be almost impossible for them to get away from that because you have so much mobility. That's combined like 1,200, range you can close. And then you can lock them down for 2.5 seconds. They can't flash out of it. They can't do anything to get out of that unless they knock you out of that zone. Or if they just want to turn around and fight you. So that's really good. So she has a really good borderline oppressive laning phase. She's really good on gank. She's very mobile. She's good at avoiding gank. She scales really well in terms of damage. So that just makes her kind of the ultimate split pusher right now. Really, really good. Because she doesn't sacrifice a lot of laning phase. Some other champions that are good at split pushing aren't that hot in the laning phase. Such as like Gangplank, for example. But she doesn't have really any weaknesses at any point in the game unless she falls really far behind. Someone else is Fiora. So Fiora is kind of a similar profile in that she doesn't have as much mobility. She just has this lunge where she can kind of, jump out if someone's like coming after her. She can get over walls and things with it. It's not nearly as good as the hook shot is, but it's still pretty good at helping you escape. And then she's just really good at one-on-one. I mean, she is the duelist, right? Duelist dance. And so when she puts that ultimate on you, it's going to be very difficult to beat her one-on-one because she's going to heal for a ton. She procs true damage off her passive. And she's just going to dance around you. Now, a lot of that is dependent on Riposte, which is a really good defensive ability. I talk about both these champions a lot in my my best one-trick video, so I'm not going to go into super depth about them here. But this allows her to dodge most crowd control abilities, gives her a great degree of safety, and once again, has true damage in her kit, off of her duelist dance, really high scaling, pretty mobile, excellent 1v1. It's very, very difficult if she is even on items to beat her in the mid to late game one-on-one. So that makes her a great duelist. Jax is another one. You aren't seeing Jax as much as a top laner because he has a really rough laning phase, but you're seeing him more in the jungle, which kind of bypasses that rough laning phase. He does have okay ganks with his stun. But yeah, Jax is another one. Similar profile, decent mobility because he can leap strike to wards. So he can drop a ward over a wall and he basically gets a free flash over a wall. So it's not as strong of mobility once again as Camille, but it's like on par with Fiora. He can jump over walls, get away from stuff. It's decent, and he has a ton of damage and scaling. Now, he's actually even tankier than Camille. And Fiora. And a big reason for this is that, he gets a bunch of extra armor and magic resist. Gains bonus armor and magic resist for 8 seconds. So yeah, I mean, he's getting like a bonus, 50 or 70, and then plus 50% of his bonus AD. So if he has 100 bonus AD, he's getting 120 bonus armor and magic resist. And that's why it can feel like it's impossible to kill this guy late game. He gets a ton of free tankiness, does a ton of damage, really good at split pushing. So he's probably the best jungler split pusher. It's awkward to do that. You need to make sure Baron's not available or Dragon's not available if you want to do that, but that is an option. Nasus is another one. Nasus is a little bit different. I think he's the best overall top laner for solo queue right now. The reason is, like, his scaling is just insane, and it's really hard to hold him back with the current runes and itemization that he can go. He could pretty much just sit there and free farm in lane with Grasp. It's very hard to trade because Grasp is going to heal him, and he has 20% bonus lifesteal, and that's going to heal him. And we've all seen Nasus, right? When he gets fed, he just gets a ton of free damage off his Siphoning Strike. It's basically free. He has Wither, which slows somebody up for 95% for 5 seconds. So if you try to gank for Nasus and Nasus throws that Wither on you, it's over. Even if you flash, you're still going to be slowed for an additional, 4 seconds. You're not getting out of it. He's probably going to kill you. It's almost impossible to duel him when that's up, unless you have a Quicksilver Sash. Spirit Fire, he's going to shred a lot of your armor, which conveniently makes your Siphoning Strike do a ton more damage. And his ultimate, of course, on a very low cooldown, gives him a ton of extra health, ton of resistances, maximum HP per second, and gives him bonus resistances per second, and lowers the cooldown of his Q by 50% so that he can basically Q you every, 2 seconds. What? This guy's insane. Unless the jungler comes up and specifically camps you the entire game, and you die from it, you can even get camped if you don't die, and the rest of your team does other stuff on the map. You can still be useful later on, even if you get camped. I mean, if he just gets Trinity Force and, one defensive item, it's just off to the races. So, yeah, Nas is really hard to deal with, and the reason that I put him as a pretty good split pusher, he doesn't have the mobility as much. He does have Wither, which will allow him to get away from a lot of situations. If you're maxing Wither second, which I think you should in most circumstances, obviously you max Q first, but Wither second. Spirit Fire is okay second, but you already deal enough damage. That doesn't matter as much. The Wither's going to let you split push, because no one's going to be able to chase you down. It's going to be very hard if you Wither them and just walk away. So you're going to have some extra bonus movement speed off of Trinity. So if you just Wither them and just walk away, they're probably not going to catch you most of the time. And he can just flat out 2v1 a lot of matchups if he's really fed. You know, he turns this on. He's going to, two-shot a lot of people, a lot of squishies, 2 or 3-shot. And he has a lot of lifesteal. So don't forget that this Q, this 20% bonus lifesteal, applies to this. I'm pretty sure it applies to the Siphoning Strike damage. So, it's not uncommon for him to be lifestealing for 100, 150 per hit. Maybe even more. Later in the game off of this. And if he has a Spirit Visage, he's going to be doing it even more. So he's a really, really good split pusher. Also, Q works on towers. So, when this is really fed, you can almost, 3-shot towers. Just well, I guess not 3-shot, but 3 Qs. Auto Q, auto Q, auto Q, dead. So he's really, really good at taking towers. He can potentially 1v2 a lot of enemies if he gets pretty fed. And he can walk away from most ganks because he can just Wither. Shin is another one that I'll mention. He's the best tank top lane for splitting. And, the most obvious reason for that is he has an ultimate that can allow him to zip around the map. And then he can teleport back. So he can basically, has 2 globals in his kit. But he also has pretty good max % health built into his kit, and he can build all tank pretty much and still do a ton of damage because of this max % health on his Q. So it's 6% of the target's max health if you get your Q to go through him, which is almost always going to happen. And he gets 50% bonus attack speed when he's doing this. So he's just bam, bam, bam. There's 18% of your health. Okay, do it again. Bam, bam, bam. 18% of your health. Then as he does this, he gets his shield back over time. And it comes back really quickly. Once he gets to level 12, he gets 5.5 seconds back on his key barrier when he hits him with the Q. So, he's going to get a bonus, whatever this is, 300 shield every, 2 seconds. He's going to be dealing 18% of their max health every, 2 seconds. He's going to have this, which blocks a lot of stuff. He's going to have Shadow Dash, which lowers the key cooldown a lot also. And then he's got a Stand United. So he is very, very difficult to duel when he gets fed. You're going to need, a Fiora or a Camille. And sometimes in the mid-game, at, 2 items, maybe 3 items, I think Shin can even beat Camille or Fiora at times, depending on sort of what the itemization is and, what's going on. But he is really, really strong for a tank in a 1v1. It is very difficult to push this guy to lane. So, really strong, great global pressure. Gangplank is another one. Gangplank has been nerfed a lot. I would have had him much higher. This isn't exactly a tier list, but it's kind of a tier list for solo queue. There are other ones that I didn't mention that could be good, for sure. I just listed 15 that kind of came to mind. Gangplank's another one, and the big part is he gets movement speed off of his barrels, so he can get away really easily. He usually runs Ghost Blade, so he can run away, and then he has his ultimate for global presence in addition to teleport, so he basically has double global. It's hard for most Gangplanks to just straight up 1v1 somebody top lane, but he can push and then roam really easily and just go farm other stuff. and he's really good at team fighting. That's the thing about Gangplank is like, yeah, you can split if you want, but he can also double up as a team fighter. Like, you can show up to fights and actually fight. Whereas, like, with Camille or Fiora or Jax, like, it's really hard to jump into 5 people and fight. Jax is a little bit better at that because he has his Counter-Strike or whatever, where he's basically immune to all auto damage, and he gets just super tanky. So Jax can kind of roll up and fight, too. Like, Camille and Fiora aren't that hot in 5v5s, you know? They're okay if they can flank and get to the back line. The Gangplank's great. You can drop your ult right on the fight, and if you land a barrel, you know, on 1 or 2 people, the fight's probably over. You probably just won. So, Gangplank's unique in that he can't really... He's probably not going to beat Camille and Fiora or Jax in a 1v1 or Nasus in a 1v1 top lane, but he can definitely push him in and get away and apply team fight pressure if he rotates down. Zed's another one. Really strong. You don't usually see him in the top lane, but he's probably one of the best mid laners who can split. You know, if he gets really fed, it's very difficult for anyone to deal with him unless they're a mega tank, and he can get away really easily with his shadows. So he's not that great against tanks, but he does have really nice wave clear, really nice mobility, and he's really good at that strategy of pushing people in and then rotating back to the team and then flanking. So he'll push and rotate quite a lot instead of push and pressure the tower. And yeah, that's just another way of getting people to split up, and then he can catch them out in the jungle a lot of times too. So he's, you know, he wants to force rotations and catch people out in the jungle, which is what a lot of assassins do. Other assassins, you know, any assassin can really do this in a side lane if they have teleport. I think Zed a lot of times will take ignite, so you have to be careful with that. But he does wave clear really quickly, and he can rotate back to his team pretty quickly, so he's a little bit less dangerous than others with it. But like Fizz, LeBlanc, a lot of champions like that can split push side lanes. He's just a lot better at wave clearing, I think, than they are, and that's why I have him up there. A little bit more Talon can do that too. So there are other champs like that. I just use Zed as kind of the representative there. Riven, another great one. Riven is very skill dependent in lane. She has a lot of really tough matchups. I think that Camille and Fiora just offer more to the table. They have true damage, so they can actually fight tanks. Riven has a really hard time fighting tanks unless she's very far ahead. She's really reliant on lethality a lot of the time to be effective. I think I almost never see Rivens anymore, but I think she still is kind of on that Ghost Blade, Dust Blade. I know she likes Cleaver too. There are a few different builds with her. So Riven can be really good if you're really good on Riven. You know, she has a lot of mobility. She wave cores really quickly. She can 1v1 if you're super good with her, but she requires a ton of skill to play correctly, and she has a really tough laning phase in certain matchups. So Riven's another one. Garen's a pretty good easy mode one. He's really tanky. He does quite a lot of damage with just Black Cleaver, so you can just go, like, you know, Black Cleaver into full tank if you want. I've also seen, like, Ghostblade Garen be okay because you can be really fast and still do quite a bit of damage. And once he hits level 11, he has a lot of health regen. So Garen is actually pretty respectable, honestly. Like, I used to make fun of Garen. I thought he wasn't that good. They did tweak him a little bit. They buffed him some. And especially at gold and lower, I think Garen can be quite a beast. You know, he's just very easy to play. His judgment just wave clears instantly pretty much. If you just run at somebody, Q him, judgment him, and then threaten Demacia and Justice, you'll probably, you know, you'll probably kill him. Especially squishy champions in lane. I think with kind of the most recent buffs to Darius is a little bit better in lane oppression, but Garen is better in the split push because he's so fast, and if you just run away, he's just a pest. Like, if you just run away for a little bit, he's going to have all of his health back off of Perseverance, and then he just comes right back, full health, you're injured from his last trade with you, and then eventually he just out-attritions you. So he's very good. Gnar has taken a couple of hits with the Frozen Mallet change, but he can still be really good. I have him lower because he's really hard to execute in solo queue, because if you show up to fights, if you teleport in, you really need to, like, be just about to turn to Mega Gnar and show up Mega Gnar. If you roll up and your Mega Gnar is on cooldown, or if it doesn't have much charge to it, then he's not going to be that helpful. So he's a little harder to coordinate with in solo queue, but he can still be really strong. Yorick is another one. I don't know a ton about Yorick. I do see him in some games do well. I know he split pushes very well with his Maiden. I think he can get ganked and killed pretty easily. He does have his Dark Procession that can kind of wall people off if they don't have mobility, but a lot of top laners will be able to get around that. So I don't know. I see him. I just don't see him as a major threat a lot of the time. He's kind of a rare champion to see. But I do know that with his maiden, and if you go something like Banner of Command, you can create a lot of pressure in side lanes. I don't think he does that much in team fights. He's okay. But if he gets ahead, if he gets his Trinity and a couple of tank items, you know, he can definitely be pretty strong. I feel like just something like Nasus would probably be safer and better. But Yorick can be good too. Jace is another one, kind of like Gnar, really good early game pressure, falls off pretty hard late game, doesn't have a lot of CC, relies pretty heavily on lethality. So he can be very good if you get ahead and if you're oppressive early, but fairly easy to gank and kill. He can run away, but he doesn't have dashes. He can't get over walls. So, you know, Jace is excellent for, like, some Korean pro players, you know, like Khan. He's great, but for, you know, us mortals in solo queue, he can be good. But you dang well better get ahead early and dominate later. He does take towers really, really well. So if you get ahead, if you can just bully people out in a split push hard, you can just completely crush those towers. Okay, another one, Udyr. Then we'll go ahead and end the video here in just a moment. Udyr is just really fast. Now, Udyr is obviously a jungler most of the time, so you're not going to have teleport, which is really risky to split push, so you need to be very careful if you do this if Baron's up. You need to make sure your team has a ton of pressure and they're not going to die. But he does split push very well. He wave clears. He rotates really fast with his bear stance. He takes towers really quickly with his Q. He does quite a bit of damage. So he's pretty good, especially in gold and lower, at just running around, being a pest. And he can pressure a lot of objectives at once because he's so fast. Tryndamere is another one. I think that like Camille and Fiora are just better versions of Tryndamere, but Tryndamere can just mindlessly split push and create a lot of pressure on towers. I don't know his one-on-one matchup with Camille and Fiora. He might be able to kill them one-on-one. He's going to have a really hard time with something like a Nasus, though, one-on-one, because Nasus can just wither him and walk away when he does his rage thing. Jax can counter-strike him. So I feel like Jax and Nasus and probably Shen will just bust him up. Anyone that has like high mobility or ways to evade auto attacks. But he can be pretty good. I just feel like you should most of the time just go Camille and Fiora. Singed is another one that's very divisive champion. I hate seeing Singed on my team because they always feed and die. But he can be good, especially with the new Leontre's plus Rylai's combo is very strong on him. He has an abysmal landing phase. It's really, really bad. You know, typically, historically, at least at the professional level, people will only pick Singed into tanks who don't have any sort of real threat in lane. But a lot of tanks have been buffed so much over time to be able to deal damage that even having something like a Maokai, he could still potentially kill you. So, yeah, he's okay. A lot of it involves proxy farming, though, like running past, you know, towers and, you know, because that's really one of the only ways you can farm a lot of lanes because he has really tough matchups in certain lanes is just proxy farm. So that means go behind the tower and just, like, farm the waves on the side. There are a lot of guides out there for Singed if you want to check it out, but I would highly recommend not playing Singed in solo queue. You can win with him. He does have a very unique playstyle, which a lot of people find very fun. You know, if you just like to be a real pain in the butt for people and just troll people and just make people rage out, like, he can be a lot of fun. He's really annoying for people who have to try to chase him down. But in general, I think he's very gimmicky, and I think that he can be shut down and killed quite a bit. But he can be good, too. You know, I don't have enough experience on him, but I can just tell you, anecdotally, almost every time I see a Singed, they feed, and it's bad. So, anyways. Okay, well, that's going to be it for this video. Hopefully this helped you figure out, give you some ideas about split pushing. So thank you so much to Steve. So just remember that, you know, if you're split pushing, make sure your allies have enough map pressure so that you're not going to get caught. If they don't have map pressure, you need to back up after you push in. Heavily consider doing a 1-3-1 if you have multiple assassins on your team. You know, you have a Zed, a Shaco, Fizz, LeBlanc, Camille, Riven, Fiora, that type of stuff. Heavily, you know, consider doing a 1-3-1 if you have 2 or more of those champions on your team. Yeah, make sure you have good vision. Make sure you communicate with your allies. Let them know, like, hey, you know, try to create pressure. I'm going to be split pushing, or hey, back up let me generate some pressure first. If your team is wanting to fight, just say, hey, let me get this wave pushed up first. So just always communicate with your team, let them know what you're doing, and try to direct them. Because remember, the challenge is on the macro. The micro level's simple, right? It's just you're taking it down to a 1v1, and ideally, you're just going to be, your team will just be catching people out in rotations and not team fighting that much if you're trying to execute a good split push. So you've got that covered. The micro is pretty easy to manage. It's just the macro is the problem. Is communicating, getting vision, getting your team to make smart decisions, communicating when you have teleport, when you don't, communicating if the enemy uses their teleport, just making sure the matchup makes sense, making sure that you have enough power to 1v1 anyone they throw at you. So yeah, just keep all of that in mind. That should help you out a lot with split push and rotations. And that's going to be it. So thanks again to Steve. Have a good day, and I'll see y'all next time.